Hello, welcome to Arts First. I'm Wendy Earle, and with me I have the whole team today. We've got Niall, Mick, and Rachel. You'll be able to find our biographies online if you're all that interested. But we hadn't really intended to do a podcast today. We were just having a meeting, and then David Hockney died late last week, and we thought, we're having a meeting very soon, so maybe we should do a very short podcast in tribute to him, because one way or another, I think we all loved him as an artist. So Rachel is going to kick us off because she herself is an artist, and then we'll all give our own thoughts about him and just, fairly briefly cover what kind of artist he really was to each of us.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, so I've been watching and reading about Hockney so much in the past 3 days. And it's just been really interesting sort of thinking about the wide range of work he produced in many different media and also his incredible output. And he was working right up till the end. So there's over 60 years worth of work to consider. For me, obviously, like a lot of people, there are some favourite paintings which were incredibly popular. A Bigger Splash, which is Californian swimming pool, very bold, graphic image. And this one has particular resonance for me because when I was working in my local library at the age of 17, there was a poster for his exhibition at the Tate Gallery, and that was the image that was used on the poster. And I didn't really know him before then, and I was delighted when the head librarian said that I could take this poster home. And so I've probably still got it somewhere. So that was my first introduction to him. And then obviously over the years, I've seen his work at various galleries in the UK and elsewhere. But there's so much to say about him. But I think for me, the things that I really like are the fact that he really represents art for art's sake. He's making art where he's searching for beauty, or in the case of the portraits of his friends and family, you could say he's trying to convey some kind of truth. So I think for me that's interesting. And then also his personal trajectory of leaving fairly drab, well, in his own words, he wanted to get away from the drabness of the UK in the late 50s, early 60s, and was attracted to California for the brightness and the modernism and the personal freedoms. And so I think, but then obviously later in his life, he did come back to the UK and back to his home county of Yorkshire. And it's very interesting to me that in a way that he remained close to his roots. He didn't try and become American. He was a Yorkshireman in America. And I think that he had a very strong identity. He was confident about his work, but he didn't try and, I think he enjoyed being known for his work, but he didn't make himself into a celebrity. So there's a lot of qualities about him on a personal level in the way he operates as an artist that I think are also admirable. I'll stop there because other people can
always come back again and say more. Niall, did you want to say?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I'll say a couple of things, but I've got lots to say about it. I'm not quite sure where to start. Maybe we can have a bit of a conversation. Just on his return, was it about 25 years ago from something like 30 odd years in California, in LA. I read an interview with him just after he got back, and he was talking about how he was being picked up at the airport by family or assistants. It was a really dreary day, and I'd heard him say that before as well. And they were driving down a country lane, maybe to Bridlington or wherever he was going. And he demanded they stop and pull over. And he got out of the car and everybody followed him. And he started sketching. And they said, "What are you doing? It's raining. It's miserable." He said, "But look at the colours, you know." He was just look at the grey. And I guess maybe 30 years in California would make you see the grey of Northern England in a different way. But there's more to it than that. That's, I think, one of his signature things is, okay, art is about finding ways of seeing, but that was that was really, really a thing of his, a really central aspect of him. And I always took that as an inspiration, whenever, I think it's how you think about things sometimes, isn't it? When you're, it's my little inspirational quote, look at the clouds and look at the grey. Obviously, I would prefer to be in LA. I think he's been with me. It's strange, the library connection as well, because my mum used to work in the local college library, and I used to go after school and read the art books. And it was mainly Renaissance books, great masters, technique, symbolism, and all of those, So I kind of gleaned a sense of what the European tradition was out. And there must have been a Hockney book, because I remember discovering Hockney and also Stanley Spencer. And when I was at school, my one and only visit from the Midlands to London was to the National and to the Tate. And I remember making a beeline in the Tate for Mr. and Mrs. Clark and Percy. I must have seen that. And all that stuff about the traditions of European painting, it seemed to me, even when I was young, that he just seemed to fit quite naturally into it as well. And if you look at that example of Mr. and Mrs. Clark and Percy, they were society friends of his, weren't they? Looking out over, I think it was their Hampstead home, through this beautiful lit, sunlight-flooded room through the windows, and the cat's kind of looking away, and it's like this ideal life that you couldn't imagine living in Birmingham in 1975 when you were a kid. But so it's kind of an ideal, but it was also full of symbolism as well. And I was thinking about it today, how it kind of ripples back through the history of painting and that particular painting, but some of his other ones, like his parents as well, remind me of paintings like by Van Eyck, for example. So I'm no art critic, but those are the kind of things I was thinking.
Do you want to come back to the other points?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, on so the bigger splash, I remember, because it's hard, isn't it, to think about David Hockney without drawing parallels between your life, because he's a contemporary. He's like an older brother or an uncle, something in age, and so I can't help but chart life moments in relation to David Hockney. So the bigger splash, it was like that kind of iconic poster. And I remember moving to London and moving into a shared household and having the time of my life. And one of my friends, Annie, her brother lived in Southfields, and we went round to his house, and there was the bigger splash on the wall. And I remember being really captured by it, but I couldn't really tell you at that point what it was. Why was this such an exciting painting, a poster in this case? And so latterly, when I listen to artists and I understand the kind of symmetry of the pool and the buildings, and then the irregularity of the splash, and and the quality of the California light and all those things. So it's like later on you develop a language for it. But for me, I associate that with the idea of coming to London and the idea of beginning to see the wonder of some of these things and them being all around you, So I would put David Hockney in that light. Listen to him on Desert Island Discs. There's all of these programs that are now being re-aired, and do you know the audacity of the guy to go on and to pick on Desert Island Discs the song that he loved that was sung by a drag artist that he saw in San Francisco? Or what's the book that he takes away? It's a porn book. And so he's kind of irreverent, and it's very much, it like speaks to that time, but in his hands, none of those are, he's not sure he's making jokes, he laughs a lot, but all of his song choices are classical pieces of music. He's an educated, sophisticated guy, lower middle class, goes to a grammar school, but he's bringing an intellect to his outlook in the world, and I think that was something that was really inspirational. Leave it, but I think that the point about landscape and coming back and seeing colours and seeing light, it'd be something to come back to.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest splash, for all its artistic merit, just simply is an expression of his joie de vivre, and that is something that kind of comes across in a lot of stories about him, and the impression he gives that he was unpretentious and he enjoyed life, and his paintings are full of colour and, a sense of joy and a sense of pleasure he takes in looking at things. And in fact, I went to the Serpentine Gallery, where he's got his latest work exhibition up, which is about Normandy, and it's a whole panorama linked with the Bayeux Tapestry. He's basically inspired by the Bayeux Tapestry, so it's a whole panorama circling around the inside of the building, and just showing the change of the seasons. And in the gift shop afterwards, I was looking at the T-shirts and the caps and everything, and his motto was, I think, something like "look with both eyes," and his sense that if you look at things, carefully enough, you'll see what they really are. And I think that's what he tried to capture. And I think he's loved because he wasn't really part of the art world. He wasn't pretentious. He was actually very critical of the art elite, and he did what he wanted to do. And he, partly probably because of his charisma as well as his talent and skill, he made it big very early on. And then he was completely free to experiment. And he did experiment. He worked incredibly hard. His adoption of digital technologies, of new technologies, was in a way unsurpassed. He was the first one to use an iPad to create works of art. And then he uses the iPad not to create screen-size works of art, but wall-size works of art, because you could enlarge whatever you put on this small iPad screen up to any scale you pretty much like to enlarge it to. So, that you can, there are, have been exhibitions of massive works of art he's created. So I think his inventiveness and his bravery and his willingness to just really push the boat on anything new and try it out is also part of the way he remains fresh right up to his life. He never kind of grew old in his art. He always stayed young in his art. So yeah, I think Anyway, you had some more things you wanted to say, Niall.
Did I? I think it's Rachel's turn.
Oh, Rachel, sorry. Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say, really. Actually, picking up on what you said, Mick, about him having this irreverence, it's been refreshing watching the interviews with him, because it's a way that people would speak more in the past than now. He did say things that were possibly controversial, but they were his opinion, but he didn't shy away from saying it. He just delivered it, and he wasn't being rude and he wasn't being argumentative, and also I was looking into I think it was in the late 70s, then he wrote a letter to the Tate because he didn't feel that they were fully developing their collection of British art evenly with an even spread of artists. And, he just wrote a letter, and it wasn't rude, but it was just saying, maybe you need to consider this, or have you thought about that artist? And so I sort of think it's interesting now how maybe with social media, I feel like artists try to just mainly toe the line, and he was just more, it's typical of his era, when I think people just straightforwardly said what they wanted to say without worrying about the repercussions for their career. I think that's something that's different. And he was freedom loving. He still smoked, and he had a little badge that says "End bossiness soon," which I thought was really funny. And he just thought that people should be able to just get on and do the things they want to do in their life without being told off for it. So again, it's on his personal sort of outlook I also appreciate. But I think in his art, the sort of sense of freedom, like you say, Wendy, he explored so many areas. And so he, it carries through. There is a sort of integrity to it in that he's got a personal sense of freedom, but it also means that he felt free to explore different avenues. Photography also was a big area. In fact, that's something I was going to touch on, which is that he went really into photography for quite a long time, using Polaroids and sort of using many Polaroid prints into a collage piece. But actually, in later years, after he'd done all that, it's interesting to find that he was then really asserting that the photograph cannot replace a painting, which as an artist is really interesting point that he made, because in relation to the the Yorkshire landscapes that he painted, he was saying, I think it was the BBC documentary, saying you literally can't translate the view of this landscape, or you can't convey it through a photograph. You have to use a painting if you actually win it. And I think that's a really good point, and it's a very powerful one, because although he's not criticising photography, he's just saying be aware that it's not the be all and end all, and that painting still has a place. Who?
I was just wind up.
Someone was nodding.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of things occurred to me that there's so much to admire of him outside his work, and in a way you can't really separate the two. His attitude to life is kind of expressed in his work, but it did occur to me that if I knew nothing about him, which I didn't to begin with, then about his irreverence and his love of freedom and all of those kind of things, then I would still like his work. You know, it's kind of the art first, which I think is an important thing to come back to. But he was, just getting back to the bigger splash, one of my first kind of impressions of him when I was young was, I remember that should I say, I was a prepubescent teenager, shall we say, so that his paintings of boys splashing around and getting in showers and things like that had interested me more than perhaps a lot of boys. So, but then we were talking about earlier, weren't we? Was he a gay artist, or was he an artist who was gay? And for me, one thing I really loved about him was the fact that he's a painter. He's a painter, and that's the end of it. He never made a thing of his. He was open about it. Never made a thing about his sexuality, about his background. He said, "I'm some poor working class northerner." He didn't, there's no victim there, was there? And again, that kind of comes through in his work: his love of the world and his love of people and his love of nature. Yeah.
I think we should leave it there if everybody's okay with that, because that was a very good point to end on. Thank you, everybody. I should have said at the beginning, we're in my conservatory, and if you hear background noise, it's because we're open to the garden and there are children there. Anyway, thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Arts First. You can subscribe for free and listen to all of our episodes at our Substack website. You'll find that at artsfirst.uk. There you'll find relevant links, images, programme notes and other resources, and of course our donations page. You don't have to sign up for access, but if you do, you'll be kept informed of new episodes and articles as they come out. You can also listen to episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on our YouTube channel. If you like what we do, enjoy our podcasts, agree with some of our concerns on freedom of expression in the arts, for example, then we'd really appreciate any support, ideas and feedback. Tell your friends, share our episodes, sing our praises on social media. But for now, many thanks, and we'll see you next time.